Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. While a lot of attention has been paid to the devastating impact of President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill, including the cuts to Medicaid and food assistance programs, it will also pump more than $80 billion into ICE, allowing the agency to double in size. ICE will now become the dominant law enforcement agency in the country. It is also becoming the most controversial and the most vilified. The specter of masked ICE agents jumping out of vehicles and rounding up brown people in farm fields and construction sites, and hotels and restaurants, or dragging them away when they show up for their immigration hearings, or handcuffing them when they go to an emergency room with a sick child is the deliberate effort to create fear. But is it making us safer? This week I spoke to John Sandweg, who was the acting ICE director in the Obama administration.
The first thing, I think we have to put this in perspective. The administration has put ICE under tremendous pressure. This quota that they have to make roughly 3,000 arrests a day requires ICE, given the current resource laydown of the agency, it requires them to really shift their operational tactics in order to come close to meeting that goal. And what that really means is that you go away from these more surgical, targeted operations where you're looking for people with a criminal history to where you're looking for places where you can make a large number of arrests at once. So that's why you're seeing all these worksite operations where they're hitting farms or factories or Home Depot parking lots. The reason they want to go do that work is because that's where a kind of a relatively small number of agents can make a large number of arrests in one fell swoop, right? The challenge with that, though, is that I do have some concerns with that. One is when you shift to those kind of operations, you're just far less likely to find criminals. Criminals generally aren't working those hourly wage jobs. It's going to be a more random happenstance whether you find someone when you do that who has a criminal history. Conversely, the kind of tactics they were using at the beginning of the administration were really scrubbing criminal history records, looking for those individuals who were deportable, and they had a criminal history, and then going out surgically, right, looking for those specific individuals. So I think one would be the biggest concern you have is what types of individuals are now not being hunted down while the agents are busy doing these operations, right? While you're pulling agents away from those more surgical operations focused on the criminal population, it makes, in a way, it makes it a little easier for those criminals to remain in the country because you got your agents tied up doing these kind of mass worksite operations, getting these large number of arrests. I think secondly, though, is there's been a blowback, obviously, Jim, too, to what ICE is doing. And as a result of that, this kind of culture has developed where the agents feel compelled to wear masks. And I am the first to say we got to protect the safety of the officers. When you work at DHS, when you work at ICE, that is the most important thing, is protecting the safety of your workforce. The problem, though, is that, it leads to, there are all sorts of risks operationally when you're wearing these masks. You can create confusion out there in the streets. People aren't entirely sure if these are ICE officers or if they're witnessing a kidnapping. You might see local police step in to try to intervene, to help people. You might see good Samaritans who are armed, trying to, think they're witnessing some sort of assault on somebody and stepping in to protect that individual. No good comes from that. But of course, I would like to see a minimization of the wearing of masks. My sense is it's gone too far. But of course, reputationally, it kind of reinforces this image that this is a rogue agency that's out there, sweeping up people, without any accountability. And I think that, generally speaking for the agency itself, that's a problem.
I mean, you touched on it, the perception of it being a rogue agency. It's also become the most vilified agency, I think, in federal law enforcement now. I mean, we've seen these, when you look at these scenes of people just sort of confronting ICE agents, yelling, screaming at them, calling them Nazis, and all the rest. I'm curious from the standpoint of those ICE agents, what that does to them, and whether, and the idea of just simply saying, I'm just here doing my job, that only goes so far.
Yeah, you're right, Jim. And the men and women at ICE, and having worked with them for years, I will tell you this, the vast majority of them signed up to make this country safer. They want to get bad guys off the streets. Unfortunately, a lot of, because of the administration's mass deportation plans, a lot of them have been diverted to these operations that really don't have that impact on public safety. But you're right, they're also devastating for the reputation of the agency. And now you got to understand, Jim, that hurts the agency in a couple of ways. First of all, half of ICE is traditionally a criminal investigative agency working on drug cartels, money laundering operations, child exploitation, saving kids, who are being trafficked or otherwise, exploited with child pornography, cases like that. When they work those cases, they work collaboratively with their state and local partners. Unfortunately, because the agency is now being vilified like it is because of the work and the kind of operations that the administration has forced them to undertake, it really makes it hard for them to collaborate with state and locals. It just severs that entirely, and the ability of the agency to get those transnational gang members or save kids from exploitation is really diminished as a result of it. But you're right as well. There are these larger reputational issues that all of this creates that's going to take the agency decades to recover from and is devastating for morale. And Jim, look, at the end of the day, even with this mass deportation effort, there's a simple reality at ICE, which is that the agency only has the capacity to really deport 400,000 to 500,000 people a year at most, and that's generous. Now, with everything that this administration is doing, let's up that to 700,000 or 800,000. The bottom line is we have 12 million people in this country who are undocumented, millions more who maybe crossed the border in recent years who are in immigration court proceedings, plus people who are legally present who get convicted of a crime and become deportable as well. The point is that the ICE's capacity to arrest is a fraction of the undocumented population. And what a lot of the men and women at ICE recognize that. And what they believe is we should focus first on the worst. Let's get the worst first. Let's get those serious criminals off the streets first. Then we can pivot, to the larger population. Unfortunately, things are working backwards right now. We got the agency pulling agents away from criminal investigations, pulling agents away from those child exploitation cases, and saying your top priority is to get large numbers of arrests in the Home Depot parking lot. When you do that, you're diminishing public safety. And like I said, recognizing that the agency really does have limited resources, you're saying you're basically prioritizing those non-criminal populations before you get those bad guys.
But I think part of the strategy that the White House has, I'm not saying that on the street ICE agents necessarily have this policy. I think it's Tom Homan's policy. I think it's Stephen Miller's policy, is to create fear, to terrorize communities in the hopes of getting people to flee, to go deeper into the shadows, or to self-deport, as they like to phrase it. So in a way, I see ICE as being used as an instrument of terror to create that fear, to try to get rid of people through that means, as well as physically actually rounding them up. Do you disagree?
I don't want to say it's becoming an agency of terror, but I absolutely think, and I don't think the administration would, tell you this is a secret, right? I think they're pretty open about it. Absolutely. I do think that part of the strategy is to create fear and uncertainty in the immigrant population in order to drive self-deportations. Look, Stephen Miller and Tom understand that ICE's resources are limited and that they can't deport all 12 million people in 4 years. It's impossible. So I think you're right. I think a lot of the strategy here of the administration is a self-deportation strategy to put the immigrant communities under tremendous pressure in order to encourage people to drive them home. Part of that is creating a sense that you're not safe wherever you go, whether that's your work site, lifting the sensitive location policy that restricted ICE agents from doing operations in churches or hospitals. All of that, I could not agree with you more. Even these detention facilities like Alligator Alcatraz, where there, are deportations in El Salvador. All of that is designed to encourage people to self-deport in recognition of the fact that ICE doesn't have the resources to deport everyone who's in this country.
Well, you talk about resources. The bill that the Senate and the House just passed, that the president signed, makes ICE now the largest, or will make ICE the largest law enforcement agency in the United States. Should ICE really be the prominent, overwhelming law enforcement agency in the United States?
First of all, I'd say that ICE probably won't be the largest. It is a fundamental change. It is going to build an immigration enforcement apparatus like we have never seen in this country. It is going to increase detention beds more than double the available detention space for ICE. It's going to more than double the number of agents. I think that technically it'll still probably be a little bit smaller than the FBI, and certainly ICE's sister agency, Customs and Border Protection, will be bigger. But put that aside, I agree with you. I think all of this mass deportation raises a fundamental question about what are the greatest priorities within the United States from a public safety perspective. This administration has said immigration enforcement is a priority. certainly, if you ask me, I think that the other priorities that ICE has historically emphasized, which are being decreased, those child exploitation cases or the money laundering cases or the war against the cartels that are, importing fentanyl into the United States. Those absolutely, in my mind, should be a priority. And Jim, with all this immigration, right, there's a kind of a tension between the quality of your arrests, how, you can sink thousands or hundreds of hours of agent hours into getting one transnational gang member off the street, where during that same time, you can make 150 arrests of just farm workers who are looking to, support their family and not committing crimes. I absolutely believe that it is a much better investment to invest that time to get that really dangerous guy who hides, who's hard to find, that requires a lot of agents doing a lot of sophisticated work to find, than it is to get those farm workers. This administration has chosen the opposite. I think the American public is going to have to make a decision at some point, but you're right. We are now, with these investments, building an apparatus we have never seen before. And one thing I'll tell you, Jim, is two things quickly. One is that this new ICE is going to be something that outlives the Trump administration. The future presidents are going to have to figure out what do they want to do with the ICE that is now, 30,000 agents roughly, and 100,000 beds deep. It is going to be a very interesting question. And I don't think that was accidental. I think the administration knew that they were implementing a longer term vision where immigration enforcement becomes a much bigger priority for the United States than it's ever been.
Do you worry at all as ICE now ramps up the hiring of agents as to the quality and the type of person who is signing up to join ICE at this time? Again, I go back to looking at these videos that I see, and that doesn't seem appealing to me. When I look at the confrontations, the folks wearing masks, grabbing people the way they are, the confrontations in the streets, that doesn't seem like a job that screams out, I want to do that, unless I have a particular mindset that on the dark side, on the positive side, yes, I want to help my country, I want to make it safe. On the dark side, I want a piece of that. I want to go in there into these communities and show them what's what, because this is the real America. I'm worried about the type of person who is going to now sign up to be an ICE agent going forward. Is that
Jim, I'm worried as well. I think there is no secret the administration is going to want to push these assets out on the street as quickly as possible. It is not going to be so easy for them. Let's say hiring. So you're going to hire 10,000 new agents. You need to recruit those agents. You need to vet them. And ICE has internal standards. You typically will do background checks, interview friends and families, make sure somebody is suitable enough to take the position, that they're getting into it for the right reasons. Then you send them down to an academy and train them, and then they get into the field and have additional training in the field. The point is that I think this administration is going to be tempted to cut corners. They're going to want to get those agents out on the street as quickly as possible. In the normal course, if you don't lower your standards, it is going to be at least 2 years before you see 10,000 additional agents out there, probably more likely 3 or 4 years. And Jim, really fast, there's a parallel to this. At the tail end of the Bush administration, they really ramped up the Border Patrol. And in the years after, and the administration really accelerated that hiring. And a lot of people argued they cut corners and lowered their internal vetting and background check standards in order to get those agents online and get them down to the border. In the ensuing years, there was a real struggle at CBP with corruption cases and use of force issues. People, violating policy by using excessive force and or taking bribes to, facilitate illicit cross-border traffic. The point is that there was a sense amongst a lot of groups and a lot of, government watchdogs that the lowering of the bar created all these problems in the next 3, 4, 5 years. Absolutely, I think there's serious concerns here. At ICE, we want to make sure that people are getting into this for the right reason, because they want to help their country and they want to help make their country a little safer. I do worry that in the political environment we're in, that if you lower those standards, you might get people who are getting into it for the wrong reasons. And I will just say quickly, ICE historically is very good at internally vetting those candidates, making sure that we're getting the people who are getting into it for the right reasons. But under this, they're going to be under tremendous pressure to hire. And I think it's just critical that they not lower those standards as a result of it and not diminish all the safeguards that are in place to ensure that you're getting the best and the brightest in these positions.
When we come back, Congressman Jared Moskowitz, as we talk about why the Epstein case is burning like a fire through MAGA world. Stay with us. Welcome back. President Trump continues to be dogged by questions surrounding the Jeffrey Epstein case. This week, I spoke to Congressman Jared Moskowitz, who, along with other Democrats, is now pushing for the release of those Epstein files.
Well, what a self-made disaster, right? And I'm not talking about the president himself. I'm talking about the whole administration that was involved on this. Remember, let's go backwards, though, first. So when Trump first ran, and was on stage with 30 other Republicans, he was asked about when he was running against Hillary, right? And he said, well, Bill has lots of problems coming, because he went to Epstein's Island. Just ask Prince Andrew. Trump brought it up, even back in that race. And from then on, he's been using it, a lot of projection on it. And his entire MAGA base, right, took this up as a call for arms, that this was a pedophile, and we needed, and there were rich people, high society people on that list, and that we needed to get it out. We needed to uncover it. The deep state was the one keeping it from the people. That was what they were telling people. Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, right? The FBI director, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, both really come into the administration on the back of the whole Epstein debacle. Pam Bondi, who worked on that in Florida as the attorney general, she becomes the attorney general. And one of the first things she does is she does these binders. Nothing's in them, of course. That's not already public record. And then she says, the list is on my desk. The list is on my desk. And then they say there's no list. There might also be no desk. This is so self-made. And now the most interesting piece comes. And the most interesting piece is President Trump, who went from, I'm going to release JFK, I'm going to release Martin Luther King, I'm going to release, the aliens, and I'm going to release Jeffrey Epstein, is pushing back on this harder than almost anything he's pushed back in the 6-7 months now that he's been president. And you have to ask yourself why. That, I think, is what is capturing the minds of Americans beyond folks that pay attention to politics. Why is he pushing back so hard, right? What is it that is either in these files that either implicate him or implicate others? Okay, what is it? Because this idea that there's no there there, if there's no there there, then just release what we have and move on. Here's it, here's what we got, and move on. The pushback, the going after your own base, calling people weak, and that somehow this was something Democrats came up with. No, to Republicans' credit, they came up with this all on their own, and now the president's doing a 180. And the people he's been telling this to, right, for the last several years are like, no, we're not abandoning, who was a child predator pedophile. We want to know who went to the island.
The best analogy that I've heard others use is it's almost as if an arsonist who sets a fire then suddenly comes to realize you can't control where the fire burns once it starts burning out of control.
Well, now it's burning his house. That's the problem. He set it down the block, and now the fire is coming for his house.
And what I do think is significant with regard to his base is Donald Trump rose to power by basically saying, yes, I am wealthy. Yes, I am successful. I am part of that so-called elite, but I'm not really one of them. And if you let me get inside that circle, if you elect me, I will break it up from the inside and expose all the secrets. And so now that he's there, the expectation is that he'll expose all the secrets. And when you don't, that's what I think is evoking such strong reaction from the MAGA base that says, hey, is Donald Trump for real after all? Or is he just part of what you described as the deep state that we've always feared about?
Or it was all a lie. Right? Like all of these things were ginned up, right? Because they either are lying now or they were lying then, right? They either made it up, and as it turns out, there is no there there. In fact, the guy from Project Veritas, O'Keefe, you're watching him, Michael Flynn, Benny Johnson, right? These are major MAGA people that are on the other side of this than the president. But, they're basically saying, look, this is one of two things. There's either no there, which if that's the case, then just release what you have. But if it's not that, then it's so damaging, it could bring down the entire government, right?
All right. I want to move on to Alligator Alcatraz. You visited there the other weekend. We talked, I know you and I have talked sort of before and going into it. What did you see during your tour? What's your takeaway from what's happening out there? And we're hearing more and more reports that it's a black hole. Lawyers can't get access to their attorneys, or lawyers can't get access to their clients. What's your understanding of the conditions there?
Yeah, so Jim, this thing should never have been built there, ever, at all, period. Okay, and it was built with the intent of wanting to put something in the middle of the Everglades, okay, for political purposes. Okay, so that's number one. I mean, literally, you get there, it's in a swamp. Okay, the mosquitoes are out of the Jurassic period. Okay, and the amount of money that was spent to put it there, okay, was much more than had they just expanded on a current facility. Remember, I used to do this job, right? Like during COVID, when we had to expand hospitals, I didn't go to the middle of nowhere and build a hospital. I went to a hospital and expanded in their parking lot. So you could have gone to Chrome, a detention center, and expanded, right? You could have put this closer to infrastructure. That would have brought down the cost. But they didn't do that because the intent was to put it there, okay? Now, as far as the facility is concerned, it looks like other detention facilities, other than the fact that it's all tents. It's all tents, these massive, huge tents that you use during base camps, huge tents, okay? And then you get into the tent. The dining facilities look fine, okay? The shower facilities look fine. And I say fine, I mean comparable to other detention facilities and jail facilities. What I did find disturbing is where they were holding people, which is the most important, okay? There were way too many people, in my opinion, in the tent. And then not were they just in tent, but they were in cages, right? They were literally, every wall plus the ceiling was just fencing, okay, with a couple of toilets. And so, look, I've been very clear on where I come on immigration when it comes to criminals, okay, how they need to be deported. They shouldn't be here, okay? But at the same time, there's a right way and a wrong way to do this, right, as we're deporting people, okay? And, I mean, it was a sight. It was an unfortunate sight to behold what's going on in that tent. They need to decompress it, in my opinion, get less people in there. That'll bring down the temperature. They have the space. They already built all this stuff. Put less people in these areas. That'll bring down the temperature, make things more humanitarian.
But isn't the cruelty the point?
It is. That's what I'm saying. It was built.
What they want? That they want that perception that it's cruel 100%. And it's unusual.
Yep. It was all put. Listen, my guess is if they weren't going to put it in the Everglades, they probably wouldn't have built it at all, right? Like this was the whole point. Alligator Alcatraz. By the way, I didn't see any alligators, but Alligator Alcatraz, right? I mean, that was the whole point. We got a name, we got an idea, put it there, okay? At a tremendous cost to the taxpayers. I think it'll probably, they're saying $500 million. I think this thing, by the time they're done, will approach $1 billion, depending on how many people they bring there. And most of it, again, they're transferring from other facilities, right? So they're transferring from other facilities when they could have just expanded at those facilities instead. But yes, and you have to go there. I mean, you can be told about it, but until you actually get there and see where they put this thing 30 miles off the highway on the Tamiami Trail, and literally in the middle of the Everglades, in the middle of right next to a Native American tribal land. This was the intent.
We'll be right back after the break. Well, that's all the time we have today. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Thanks again for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day.